Well, for more analysis, we're joined now by Jim Middleton, former political reporter, foreign correspondent, political advisor and now political consultant. Jim, you are a close watcher of American affairs. Joe Biden has a lot to do, doesn't he? And best of luck to him. He's inheriting a raft of challenges. Many of them, like the management of the coronavirus pandemic, are pressing.
Indeed they are. Good afternoon to you, Ash. Joe Biden is taking over the United States, leadership of the United States, at a point where it is a deeply divided and diseased nation. As divided, I think, as it was in the days and weeks before the Civil War in the 1860s, when you consider the fact that 70 plus million people did vote for Donald Trump, and many of them still think that the election was stolen. So that division is deep and very difficult. And also disease, which I think will be his most immediate, fairly obviously, his most immediate domestic challenge. And that's very, very difficult indeed. It was one of the reasons why suburban Americans switched from the Republicans to the Democrats at the presidential election. But the United States, as far as handling the coronavirus, is way behind the eight ball, in a worse position, I would suggest, even than the UK, and they're having very significant problems. So rolling out the vaccine, the logistics of that, the ability to do it with states which may or may not be believing that the priorities that Joe Biden brings to addressing the COVID-19 pandemic are not theirs. He's taken some very, very immediate steps, rejoining the World Health Organization and mandating masks in federal buildings. But that, in a sense, gives you an indication, too, of the limitations of his authority as far as that is concerned. So how he manages that is not just a test, but may also be the making or breaking of his presidency. If he has early success and can get the pandemic under control, which it's not at the moment, killing 4,000 people a day, and to put that into perspective, that's more than were killed on 9/11, and 400,000 deaths, more than were killed in Americans killed in World War II. You can see the magnitude of the task. So that's the immediate thing. And also the question of the issues of him saying in his inaugural speech, democracy has prevailed, but also pointing to climate change and racism. Endemic racism in the United States is something else which he intends to tackle. Now, that is a real difficult question as well. It hasn't been managed particularly well in the period since the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of the Johnson years in the 1960s. If anything has gone backwards, that is going to be very difficult to manage as he tries to heal, as he says, the United States. But number one, management of the pandemic.
So, Jim, with such a long to-do list, do you expect foreign policy will be on the back burner for a while with so many of those domestic challenges that you just outlined? What will a Joe Biden presidency mean for Australia-US relations?
Look, I don't think it can be on the back burner because of the indolence, if not utter dereliction, of the Trump years in management of foreign policy. That has to be a priority. For Australia, yes, we are good friends and a good ally and have stuck by the United States through thick and thin, but it won't be mateship that cements good relations. It will be best interests. And the world has changed significantly, even in the 4 years since Donald Trump took over. China is much more assertive, much more powerful. And I was noticing Tom Switzer, noted foreign policy analyst, writing this morning saying, look, the era of Pax Americana is over. That is that the era where the United States had global ascendancy is over. And nowhere is that more evident than in the case of China, where you might have noticed a week or so ago, there was the early release of a previously top secret American national security note on the Western Pacific. And it was interesting, not just for what it said, but for what it didn't say, because it conceded, among other things, that the United States can no longer project power on a lengthy or sustained basis within what's called the First Island chain. That is inside Taiwan and the East China Sea and so on and so forth. So already there's that inhibition. There are also going to be some interesting questions when either Joe Biden picks up the telephone, thanks, that's one of my dogs, picks up the phone to Scott Morrison or vice versa, and that shouldn't be too far away, and that is the emphasis on climate that Joe Biden has been making, not only in the inaugural address, but also his press secretary volunteered it a couple of times in the first briefing that she gave. There are also the steps he's taken, stopping progress on a gas and oil pipeline from Canada, and also rejoining the Paris Agreement. These are indications that I would think that Joe Biden will be pressing Scott Morrison very hard on issues of climate change, and not necessarily in the sympathetic way that Scott Morrison may like. So, look, it's a more certain environment for Australia. That is to be welcomed. The lunacy of the Trump years in foreign policy are over, but it's some of the things that Australia would like the United States to do, it simply cannot do anymore because it's no longer as powerful as it once was. And there are other priorities which are not those of Scott Morrison's Prime Ministership. So it'll be interesting, better, but still difficult.
We'll be watching closely. Jim Middleton, appreciate your insights.
Absolutely. Many thanks, Ash. My pleasure.